The desert doesn't forget. Its winds bury bones, secrets, and legends. But sometimes, it whispers. 1798 A young general with steel in his gaze and lightning in his mind sets foot on the sands of Egypt. His name? Napoleon Bonaparte. He came not as a pilgrim, not as a scholar, but as a conqueror. His goal? To carve an empire out of history's cradle, to strike the British Empire where it bled gold, to ignite revolution in the East, and to make his name echo beside Caesar and Alexander. But what he found was not triumph. He found plague in the streets, massacres in the shadows, betrayal in the air, and beneath every dune, resistance. This is not the story of a glorious campaign. This is the story of a gamble so bold it defied logic, and so disastrous, it nearly broke him. It's a tale of cannon fire beside pyramids, a forgotten war that unearthed ancient secrets, and a march that led straight into ruin. The desert remembers. And now, so will you. Napoleon in Egypt, the campaign that was never supposed to fail, but nearly destroyed him instead. Paris, early 1798. The air was thick with tobacco smoke and paranoia. France, scarred by revolution, ruled by shifting coalitions, stood encircled. The British blockaded the seas. The Austrians pressed at the borders. The Russian Tsar watched from the east. The Republic trembled, but its heartbeat pulsed and a name whispered across Europe, Napoleon Bonaparte. 28. Brilliant. Dangerous. Fresh from his lightning victories in Italy. His army adored him. His enemies feared him. The government watched him like a storm cloud. But Bonaparte was already dreaming beyond Europe. In a drafty, dimly lit war chamber, a map lay stretched across an oak table. France glowed in red ink. The Mediterranean spread south, and beyond it, Egypt. A land of sand, myth, and imperial opportunity. Napoleon's gloved finger stabbed the parchment. Britain's power is not in London, he said, it is in the east. In India. If we strike Egypt, we tear their empire at its root. Around him, the generals exchanged uneasy glances. Egypt? Thousands of miles away. Inhospitable. Infested with bandits and the Mamluk warlords, cavalrymen who fought like lightning and answered only to violence. And the Ottomans? Still nominal rulers of Egypt. Could they risk antagonizing another empire? One voice finally spoke, uncertain, why not strike in Europe? Napoleon turned to him, not angry, but calm. In Europe, I am a general. In the East, I will be something greater. There it was. His ambition not just a campaign but a stage, and it wasn't just soldiers he would bring. Oh no. Napoleon would march with an army of scientists, philosophers, geographers, mathematicians, 167 of France's brightest minds, a mobile civilization. A force of conquest and enlightenment. We will not just conquer Egypt, he said, we will understand it. We will uncover its ancient secrets. That he was not wrong. In May, 1798, 400 ships left Toulon under cover of night, vanishing into the southern horizon. Napoleon aboard the flagship L'Orient, staring silently into the moonlit sea. Behind him, France held its breath. Ahead was a land that had seen Caesar, Alexander, and pharaohs. A land that does not forgive fools. A land waiting to test him. And beneath the surface of it all, fate had already started writing its terms. July 1, 1798. Alexandria. Before sunrise, the fleet crept along the coast like silent ghosts. More than 400 ships, carrying soldiers, scientists, horses, cannons, engineers, printing presses, even a hot air balloon, now loomed just off the shore of Egypt. It was one of the largest naval expeditions in European history. From the deck of L'Orient, Napoleon Bonaparte gazed across the water. Behind him stood the greatest army France had ever sent abroad. Before him, sand. Endless, blinding, unrelenting sand. But this wasn't just a military maneuver. It was theater. Napoleon would stage his legend here, not on the battlefields of Europe, but among the relics of Ramses and Cleopatra. He raised his spyglass. The city of Alexandria, crumbling but defiant, shimmered under the rising sun. "We are standing at the gates of history," he murmured. The landing began. Men leapt into the surf, rifles lifted above their heads. Horses panicked in the shallows. Cannons were hauled like dead giants across the beach. The heat? Merciless. Many collapsed before the first shots were fired. Most had never seen a desert before. They expected dry heat. What they got was a furnace. And yet, alongside the soldiers came another wave, scientists. Over 160 of them. Engineers measuring the coastline, botanists cataloging unfamiliar shrubs, geologists digging through sand for fossils. To the average soldier, it was bizarre. One officer watched a man in spectacles take notes on sand grain texture and muttered, "We'll all be dead and he'll still be studying dirt." But this was Napoleon's vision, a campaign of both sword and scroll. To conquer with knowledge. To civilize. To elevate. At least, that's what he told Europe. In truth, the plan was also practical. Egypt would serve as a stepping stone to India, and if Britain's supply routes could be broken, their empire would bleed out quietly, without a single battle on English soil. Yet Egypt was no empty land. It was ruled by the Mamluks, fierce warriors descended from slave soldiers, now masters of the region. Proud, ruthless, and born in the saddle, they ruled with blades and fear. Even now, word of the landing spread. Messengers galloped across the sands. The Mamluk Beys, Murat and Ibrahim, would meet this invasion not with diplomacy, but with steel. Meanwhile, the people of Alexandria watched from behind crumbling walls. Some curious. Most afraid. They had seen conquerors before. The French flag now flew over their beach. But the desert remained unconquered. That night, with the wind scratching sand against tents, Napoleon addressed his men, "You are standing where Alexander once stood. He built an empire from this soil. So shall we." But the wind whispered a warning. This wasn't Europe. This was Egypt, ancient, unyielding, and patient. It had outlasted kings, prophets, crusaders, and it was ready to test this new boy general. And so began one of the strangest invasions in history. A collision of science, war, religion, and ego, baked under a sun that showed no mercy. July 21, 1798, near Cairo. The air was dry, choking with dust. The heat pressed down like an iron lid. Every breath tasted of sand. Napoleon stood at the head of his army, squinting into the horizon. There, far in the distance, shimmering through the haze like ghosts, stood the pyramids, massive, ancient, unblinking. And in front of him, the Mamluks. They were not like any enemy the French had ever faced. No uniforms. No marching lines. These were warriors born in the saddle, wrapped in silk and steel, their curved sabers gleaming under the sun. The Mamluk cavalry was legendary, swift, brutal, fearless. Raised from childhood to ride and kill. They were not just soldiers, they were symbols of an old world where battles were won by valor and speed, not discipline and firepower. Napoleon, as always, read the moment. He turned to his officers and said, "Do not forget, you are not fighting men. You are fighting legends. But remember, legends bleed." Then, he addressed the troops. "Soldiers. From the heights of these pyramids, 40 centuries look down upon you. Today, we write the next chapter." Silence. Then a ripple of adrenaline spread through the lines. At around 3 p.m., the Mamluks made their move. A horn sounded across the dunes. From beyond a ridge, thousands of cavalry thundered forth, a blinding mirage of motion, flags flying, sabers flashing, horses screaming. They charged as one mass, kicking up a sandstorm behind them. It was awe-inspiring and terrifying. French soldiers gripped their muskets, eyes wide. Many had never seen cavalry move this fast. But Napoleon had drilled them for this. He didn't form lines. He formed squares, each division arranged into a giant hollow box of men, 5 ranks deep, with muskets on every side. Cannons at each corner. Horses and supplies protected in the center. The order rang out. Hold. Hold. Fire. Musket fire erupted in synchronized waves. Dozens of Mamluks fell in the first volley, men torn from saddles, horses tumbling mid-charge. But the cavalry kept coming. They smashed against the squares like a wave hitting stone. Some Mamluks leapt from their horses mid-gallop, trying to vault into the formation. Others hacked at the bayonets, screaming in fury. Inside the squares, drummers pounded out the rhythm of survival. Wounded men were pulled back into the center. New muskets replaced the fallen. The French machine did not break. One soldier later wrote, "They came at us like thunder, and died like men in a storm." After an hour of relentless charges, the Mamluk lines began to fracture. Horses lay in pools of blood. Smoke choked the battlefield. The Mamluks, who had never known defeat in open combat, began to retreat. Napoleon seized the moment. He unleashed the cavalry and the forward infantry. What had started as defense now turned into a ruthless pursuit. By sunset, the battlefield belonged to France. Over 2,000 Mamluks lay dead or wounded. The rest had fled across the Nile, leaving behind cannons, gold, even tents filled with silk and spices. French losses were minimal. As the sun dipped behind the pyramids, Napoleon rode alone through the wreckage. He dismounted and stood before the great stones of Giza, silent monuments to power, to ambition, and to impermanence. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He had faced one of the fiercest warrior cultures in the world, and crushed them with strategy, discipline, and fire. In Europe, kings would recoil. In Cairo, the people would wait in dread. And in London, they would soon receive terrible news. Napoleon had taken Egypt. But even as the French celebrated under desert stars, a far greater disaster was sailing toward them, hidden in the waves of Aboukir Bay. August 1, 1798, Aboukir Bay, Egypt. The sun had long disappeared behind the desert, leaving only the stars above and the dark sea below. The French fleet, anchored in a crescent formation just east of Alexandria, rocked gently in the calm waters of Aboukir Bay. Over 1,200 guns. Napoleon had left these ships behind to secure supply lines and protect his empire in the making. But he had made one grave mistake. He assumed the British wouldn't find him. He was wrong. Admiral Horatio Nelson, a man as relentless as Napoleon himself, had spent weeks hunting the French across the Mediterranean. He was half blind. Often ill. But when it came to war, Nelson saw with perfect clarity. And on that fateful evening, he found them. As the French sailors relaxed, some even playing cards on deck, sails appeared on the western horizon. The alarm was sounded, but too late. Nelson struck like a thunderclap. The Battle of the Nile had begun. Unlike traditional admirals who attacked head-on, Nelson split his fleet, some ships sailing between the French line and the shore, others engaging from the open sea. The French had anchored too close to land, thinking it would shield them. It became a trap. The British guns opened fire. And hell followed. The air filled with cannon smoke so thick it turned the moon red. Wood shattered. Men screamed. The masts of ships split like bones. Black powder roared in the night. At the center of the French line stood L'Orient, Napoleon's massive flagship. She was the pride of the French Navy. She had 3 decks, over 120 guns, and a gold-trimmed captain's cabin. By midnight, she was a floating inferno. A single British shell struck deep into her hold, igniting the powder magazine. The explosion lit up the bay like a second sun. The sound could be heard 30 miles inland. The flames rose so high that even in Cairo, men woke thinking the sky was on fire. The shockwave leveled both British and French ships nearby. Hundreds died in seconds. Napoleon wasn't there. He was still in Cairo. But when word reached him, he said nothing for several minutes. Just stared at the sand. He knew what it meant. His fleet was gone. The French were stranded in Egypt. No reinforcements.